But will next week's results fuel the fire for stocks or put an end to their record rally? Tim, what do you think? We're going to get an awful lot of reads from, yes, big tech, but like we mentioned, Coca-Cola, General Motors, reads really across the board. What should we be expecting? How do we position?
Well, I think the market is certainly positioned that the tariff impact is less than a headwind than we thought going into Q1, or at least expecting Q1 earnings, I should say. And so it's a very different backdrop. And I think it sets the market up for possibly a little bit more caution here as we really get into the meat of it. But if we talk about Google, this is a company that has really underperformed the rest of the Mag 7. It's probably done half of what Microsoft has done over the last 3 months. And I think that setup is actually quite good. Comps are easy. I think there's better ad spend with a little more clarity around tariffs. I think what we've seen in terms of their cloud business, it's fine. I think YouTube's going to be a bright spot. And I think the company itself is priced at least attractively, even relative to itself, given the backdrop of where people are always concerned about where multiples are coming in. So it's a big week. I do think that the earnings expectations overall from the analyst community, from the investor community have moved higher. And I think that's something that needs to be watched.
Bonawyn, I'm sort of looking forward to some focus on the fundamentals when it comes to companies rather than perhaps the big macro picture, although it is impossible to separate the two all the time. What are your expectations? Do you agree with what he's talking about with sort of the difference in Google and Microsoft? Does Google have some ground to make up based on what they tell us?
Well, in terms of performance, they certainly do. It's trailed. The Mag 7 is now the Mag 3 or 4. And that continues to we see switching in and switching out of who those top performers are there. I think with the Alphabet story, it really is going to be about whether or not their incumbent search business has the legs necessary and whether or not they are setting up to transition into AI kind of driven search and they can kind of defend ground there. Again, I don't think it's necessarily important that they get it right this quarter, but I do think being that they've been under scrutiny, that investors are really going to be looking under the hood to see whether or not they have, a legitimate answer to what their plans are going forward. The other thing that I think you're going to start to kind of see is insight into CapEx spend. And we have had this kind of AI resurgent. If you start to see a bit of pullback in CapEx or CapEx related plans, perhaps people think twice about that. But I think ultimately we do want to see the earnings from these tech players, the mega caps, because them and the AI adjacent plays have really been what have taken us to this next leg higher.
Yeah, so many interesting points there. Of course, AI, Courtney, has been sort of this key phrase that everybody wants to say and be a part of. When will we see some of that CapEx that's been plowed into AI by some of these big names really start to show some dividends in the form of margin expansion? Do we need to see it this quarter? Will that separate sort of the wheat from the trough?
I don't know if you need to see it this quarter, but we do need to see it at some point. I mean, that is the concern, is that there's so much capital expenditure at the moment, but we don't know at what point you're actually going to see them monetizing that. And I do think when you're looking at Google, who's going to be reporting next week, their valuation is much cheaper than some of your others. So I think some of this has been discounted because people are a little concerned about the fact that their search business is the main driver of their business and that AI might start to cannibalize that. Anytime you go to Google, the first thing that comes up is that AI search. A lot of people are using that, and that's going to diminish their ad revenue. And I think that is why the valuation has come down so much. And so we need to see when they're reporting earnings, is that happening? And do they have a path to really utilize that going forward, to Bonawyn's point? So I do think the good news about them is the bar isn't extremely high for them like it is some of the other companies. But I think we need to see how they do next week.